Throughout history, some laws have been so bizarre, nonsensical, and downright outlandish that they make you question the very fabric of reality. From completely strange restrictions on daily life to laws that seem to exist purely for the amusement of those in power, these regulations challenge our understanding of common sense. Whether they were born from superstition, political control, or simple absurdity, these laws will leave you stunned. Let's dive into some of the craziest laws ever made and see how they shook up society. The ban on ice cream in Singapore, 2004. In 2004, Singapore imposed a curious restriction on ice cream. While it wasn't an outright ban on eating ice cream, the law prohibited people from eating or drinking it in public places like parks, public transportation, or even on the streets. Why, you ask? Because of the mess ice cream could cause. The government argued that people eating ice cream in public spaces were often careless, leaving behind sticky wrappers or melted ice cream, which could become a nuisance and an eyesore. The law was widely criticized for being unnecessarily strict, as it targeted a relatively harmless activity. Could it really be that eating ice cream on a hot day could be illegal in one of the cleanest cities in the world? The public outcry led to the law being loosened in 2005, but it left many wondering how such a strange rule ever made it to legislation in the first place. Ban on dancing in Japan, 1948. In 1948, the Japanese government passed a law known as the Act on Control of Dancing, which made it illegal for people to dance in public after midnight. The law was passed to curb the rise of dance halls that were seen as places where immoral behavior could take place, such as gambling or prostitution. The government's reasoning was based on fears of public moral decay and the belief that dancing encouraged the wrong kind of social behavior. For decades, Japan remained one of the few countries in the world with a nationwide ban on dancing after midnight. It wasn't until 2015 that the law was finally repealed, largely due to the rise of younger, more liberal generations who pushed back against the restrictive rule. However, this law made one thing clear. Japan's legal system once believed that dancing could somehow lead to the unraveling of societal norms. The no shoes, no shirt, no service law, various U.S. states. While many restaurants and businesses across the world implement dress codes, the concept of banning shoes or shirts in certain places is another level of craziness. For instance, in some parts of the U.S., it is illegal to go without shoes or a shirt in certain public spaces, but not for health reasons or safety. Instead, this law was put into place as a way of enforcing social decorum. The absurdity of this law lies not in the desire to maintain a clean, comfortable environment, but in the fact that some businesses would refuse service for something as minor as a casual wardrobe choice. It's one thing to prevent people from entering places with harmful or dangerous attire, but entirely another to be in a world where people are scrutinized for something as basic as choosing comfort over fashion. This law makes us question whether social expectations are truly necessary or just arbitrary rules that make no real sense in the grand scheme of things. The law against flushing toilets. After 10 p.m. in Switzerland, 2007. In Switzerland, one of the most bizarre laws ever put into place revolved around the quiet enjoyment of residential life. In 2007, residents of Switzerland were banned from flushing toilets after 10 p.m. in certain apartment buildings. The law was implemented to minimize noise pollution at night and to ensure that tenants living in close quarters didn't disturb each other with loud noises during the late hours. While it's true that noise complaints can be a problem in apartment buildings, the idea of regulating toilet flushing is an extreme step. The law was part of a larger set of regulations that restricted other noisy activities, such as vacuuming or playing music loudly after certain hours. What truly makes this law so absurd is that it targets one of the most basic and unavoidable aspects of human life: using the bathroom. It's hard to imagine living in a world where you have to plan your bathroom visits around a specific time just to avoid being fined for noise. The no kissing in public law. Dubai, United Arab Emirates. In Dubai, a city known for its ultra-modern skyscrapers, luxurious lifestyle, and open-minded cultural scene, you might be shocked to learn that public displays of affection, particularly kissing, are illegal. While this law has often been publicized in relation to tourists, it applies to residents as well. Couples, especially tourists, can find themselves in trouble with the law for kissing in public, as the government considers such behavior to be indecent and offensive to public morals. The law is deeply rooted in the country's religious and cultural values, which uphold conservative attitudes towards romance and personal relationships. While it's important to respect local customs, the law seems incredibly outdated in a modern society where public displays of affection are commonly accepted. The idea that a couple could be arrested for a simple kiss in a public park or restaurant seems extreme by modern standards, but it's an example of how deeply embedded laws can be in societal values. The law against wearing high heels in Greece, 2009. In 2009, Greece passed a law banning high heels at ancient historical sites, particularly at places like the Acropolis. This regulation was introduced after several incidents in which visitors wore stilettos while touring the ancient ruins, which could cause significant damage to the stone monuments. High heels with their pointed heels could easily chip or scratch the ancient stonework, damaging centuries of history. While this law may make sense in protecting ancient landmarks, it's still one of the strangest legal restrictions on fashion ever. To be told that you can't wear your favorite pair of heels to visit one of the most iconic tourist destinations in the world seems like a serious overreach. What makes this law particularly crazy is that it targets tourists and fashion-conscious individuals, highlighting the sometimes absurd lengths authorities go to protect cultural heritage at the expense of personal choice. The ban on spitting in public, several U.S. states. In many U.S. states, spitting in public is illegal, with certain regions imposing hefty fines for this offensive behavior. While it may seem reasonable to restrict spitting in certain areas, such as near food vendors or public transportation hubs, this law takes things a bit too far. The law targets a natural bodily function and imposes punishment for a relatively harmless action. In fact, some states have strict laws against spitting in public places, including on the street or in parks, with fines or even imprisonment as potential penalties. In a world where people regularly engage in far worse public behavior, this law seems almost comical in its attempts to control something as trivial as spitting. It raises the question of whether such minor actions really deserve legal scrutiny, or whether the law is merely being used as a tool to create unnecessary rules to regulate people's everyday lives. The No Reptile as a Pet Law, California, 1992. California passed a bizarre law in 1992 that prohibited owning any reptile as a pet without a special license. While reptiles can certainly be dangerous or require unique care, this law went so far as to outlaw pets like turtles, snakes, and even certain species of lizards unless you had a permit. For many reptile enthusiasts, this law was a significant overreach, especially since reptiles are relatively harmless if cared for properly. While it was intended to prevent the spread of invasive species and the mistreatment of wild animals, the law resulted in many pet owners being forced to give up their reptiles or face legal consequences. In the end, it highlighted how sometimes well-intended regulations can become overly complicated and intrusive, leaving regular citizens to wonder if laws are really the best way to deal with personal pet choices. The No Singing Happy Birthday Law, U.S. 1935. Believe it or not, for decades, singing the song Happy Birthday was illegal in the United States. The song was protected by copyright, and anyone who performed it publicly had to pay royalties to the owners of the song. This law lasted for almost a century, with businesses, TV stations, and restaurants all prohibited from singing the well-known tune without paying for the privilege. This ridiculous law was only overturned in 2016 when the copyright on Happy Birthday was finally deemed invalid, making it free for everyone to sing without fear of legal repercussions. It's hard to believe that something as simple as singing Happy Birthday could have been restricted by law, but it demonstrates how copyright laws sometimes spiral into absurd territory. From absurd restrictions on fashion to bizarre regulations on public behavior, these laws remind us that sometimes governments can go too far in their efforts to maintain control or protect society from imagined problems. While some of these rules might have been made with good intentions, they often seem like nothing more than a strange reflection of the quirks of human governance. It leaves us wondering, How many more crazy laws are out there just waiting to be discovered? What other ridiculous rules might exist that we never even considered? Stay curious because the world is full of bizarre legal decisions that will make you question reality itself.